K-Billy's super sounds of the 70s weekend just keeps on coming with this little ditty that reached up to 21 in May of 1970.
Overall, there is a lot that can be said about Quentin Tarantino, both good and bad. You can criticize the man for the companies he's worked under. You can criticize the man for being a little hostile.
Just for the... What are you doing? Hey, don't do that. Don't do that again.
You can criticize the man for being a little behind the times.
I was trying...
That's what Hawk Tua means?
Hawk Tua, yes. Why, getting an idea for a movie?
No, I just had... No, I...
But love him or hate him, the man can make one hell of a film. Or 10 hells of a film. Not to say that his work can't be criticized though, because that's exactly what we'll be doing today. Slander the man all you please, Lord knows I will, but when it comes to his work, the guy is the genuine article. When it comes to directors, plenty of them have a whole host of wonderful works, but even the very best and brightest struggle to avoid a few stinkers here or there. I'm a horror fan personally, which means most of the directors I like are pretty god-awful, and managed by some grace of God to eke out one or two classics before the rest went belly up and sour. So to see somebody come up to the plate and bat 10 home runs back to back is nothing short of awe-inspiring. He's a true visionary who absolutely refuses to sell out. He's gonna do his movies, his way, everything else be damned. As a creator, it's admirable, and you can see that vision on the screen and in the performance of every actor he and his crew casts. If you told me half of your top 10 films were his, I would say that that's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that. And despite his presence being a little polarizing, from his poorly disguised fetishes to most of his films being distributed by the Weinstein Company, to some questionable dialogue here or there to say the least, opinions are understandably divided. But the quality of his work, on the other hand, is really anything but divisive. Nowadays, the only people brave enough to slander his entire filmography are engagement baiters and film geeks so far up their own butts that they just can't appreciate what Tarantino has been able to accomplish over the course of his career. And what exactly is that, you may ask? Well, he did something any artist would die for. He told the stories he wanted to tell, followed his heart, and in the end, made something truly special. 10 films that could be enjoyed not just by the critic, but by the layman. There are directors from all walks of life that time and time again have achieved amazing things, but few can say that each film they produced had a true vision or changed the entire landscape of film in the way that his have. There's something so timelessly unique and oddly fresh about Tarantino's work, and if I had to put into words what that secret ingredient was, I'd say it's that the guy gives the people what they want. Sure, he has a lot of artistic integrity, still shoots all of his movies on film, only uses a single editor, is a total visionary, but those sorts of things aren't what the average person loves. The people want a spectacle, they want to be entertained. They want to be moved to tears and sat on the furthest inch of their seats. They want a cheap and delicious 3-course meal with a free dessert at the end. I can't really stress enough how virtually impossible it is to appeal to everyone and still deliver a quality product. Because a majority of Tarantino fans are American, let me put this in a way you'll understand. Okay, so imagine a burger. If you went and got a burger from McDonald's, there's a certain comfort to be found in that. You could get that burger anywhere in the world and it would taste the exact same. It's been brought down to a science. Every corner that could be cut was cut. This is engineered to be as good to as many people as reasonably possible. In the film world, that fast food equivalent is your Fast and Furiouses, your Jurassic Worlds, your Star Wars, your MCUs, your Minecraft movies. These test tube think tank blockbusters genetically engineered to appeal to as many people as humanly possible to, of course, turn a profit. But with that generalized appeal comes a lack of quality and thought, a lack of vision. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the $65 artisan chef-crafted Nobu pineapple glazed gold leaf caviar truffle burger with 3 Michelin stars. To the average person, it can be a little off-putting at first. There's definitely an acquired taste, but it was pretty damn good, and more than anything, an experience. This would be something like the movie, Eraserhead? Sure, Eraserhead might be a phenomenal and insightful film, but 95% of people upon finding that on TV would be like, what the hell even is this? This is too much. What are you trying to say, David? It's an acquired taste. Meanwhile, everyone from Harvard to the whorehouse is going to have a hoot and a holler if they catch Pulp Fiction halfway through on cable. Don't get it twisted, there is merit to this whole spectrum. Sometimes you want to gorge on a Sawtooth fast food Burger King slop, and sometimes you want that artisan Donnie Darko full course meal. Sometimes you just want to shut up and enjoy some cheap food, and sometimes you want to indulge in something genuinely special. But what if you could have both? Imagine if there was a little mom and pop shop diner near your house and everyone there knew you. When you walk in, they ask if you want the special. They give you one of the most simple yet delicious burgers you've ever had, wrapped up in foil just the way you like it. Every time you go, there's something new about it. A new flavor, a new ingredient, a new side or drink, something transformative and memorable, and each time it blows your socks off. 2 bites in and you're practically moaning at the table. You think to yourself that it's a miracle that it can be so ever-present and comforting, yet there's always something new to look forward to. It's a perfectly large portion size. At first it looks far too big, but soon enough it's gone before you knew what hit you, and you don't feel bloated at all, like it flew right through you. Oh, and the bill comes out to $4.50 including fries and a drink. That is what a Tarantino movie feels like. He takes classic filmmaking, solid yet simple scripts, naturalistic dialogue, and just executes it all so flawlessly that it strikes this hyper-rare middle ground between quality and quantity. He lures the average person in with the explosivity of his films, and keeps the stories themselves as simple and easy to understand as possible, appealing to virtually anyone, but then adds so much complexity with that nuanced flavor, i.e. the character work, dialogue, overall vibe, the themes, the pacing, the structure, etc. Like I said, the guy just knows what people want. The very real dialogue in his films makes everyone in the audience feel comfortable, and once he's lured you into that false sense of security, he spins the movie on its head and creates one of the most hair-raising, nail-biting experiences put to the silver screen. Because, you see, people don't just want to be entertained, they want to be challenged, and more than anything else, I'd say that people want to be vindicated. The world around us, especially in the last 30 years, has felt a little unfair. We all crave a little frontier justice. If you can get down with that, with a rogue vigilante having to take matters into their own hands, then Tarantino's movies are probably for you. Because more than anything else, vindication is the through line of all of Tarantino's work. Revenge. A different director might make the theme of the story that revenge doesn't feel good, it isn't justified, and never solves anything. Taking revenge only serves to turn you into the very thing you hate. But Tarantino spits in the face of that. Characters in his films are fueled entirely by blazing hot vengeance. But their rage is justice, and Quentin gives the people what they want, which is to see the bad guy not just lose, but suffer. This is the framing device he uses for nearly all his films. Every one of them has themes of revenge. Sometimes it's the entire plot of the movie, and sometimes it's just one point, one moment at the crux of the film. But there's one of these movies that follows that theme a little less than all the others. 1992's Reservoir Dogs. I've got to level with you and say that this was not really the video I was intending to make initially. I wanted to make a giant video ranking every one of his 10 films from worst to best, but firstly, the 10th one isn't out yet. Who knows what stage of production it's in, if he's even started it yet. Second, that sort of ranking has been kind of done to death on this great state of YouTube. Third, it was virtually impossible for me to rank these things on the fly, as my number one pick could change from day to day. And fourth, and most importantly, I got 5 minutes into the first of his films and had spent an entire hour, paused, just taking notes. Unless you only want one video a year, the full Tarantino retrospective was, for lack of a better term, off the table. At least while I'm fighting tooth and nail to get something out to you guys every week. There is simply too much here to warrant watering it all down to a single project, so I just decided not to and pull the trigger on starting something big. A 10-part series chronicling each of his films as they released and reviewing them along the way. Each and every time concluding with the same old question: is this Tarantino's best? But taking notes from Tarantino's book, I'm going to move a little non-linearly and immediately spoil this video's outcome, as it's a little bizarre. So firstly, yes, Reservoir Dogs is the best Tarantino film. So far. But as will become clearer and clearer as this series goes on, no, Reservoir Dogs is not Tarantino's best film, not by a long shot. I mean, if the guy peaked with his first movie, we probably wouldn't be hailing him as one of the best directorial visionaries of all time over 3 decades later. And I think the man himself would agree with me that things seem to only go up from here. But please, stick around and let me explain why. Reservoir Dogs haters and dick riders alike are gonna have a field day with this one, because boy do I have some compliments and complaints. So we've been yapping a lot about stuff like context and nuance, but what is Reservoir Dogs? Well, it's a crime thriller pretending to be a noir stage play pretending to be a crime thriller. Most of the film is about 6 men, mostly in one room, and all with a hell of a lot to talk about. These men, all with color-coded aliases, are criminals, thieves trying to pull off a diamond heist. A shipment of uncut stones was just sent to Karina's wholesale diamond jewelry store, and the heist leader, a tall, imposing man named Joe Cabot, found out about this shipment and formed a group of men to get those stones and run. But quickly, very quickly, everything goes awry. And the question begs an answer. Is there a rat among the crew? Interestingly, we never see this heist occur, because it simply is not the focus of the film. This isn't a heist movie, it's a crime movie. It's not about diamonds, it's about criminals, about men. We only see what leads up to the job and the cataclysmic fallout that it spirals into. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we should probably start at the beginning. But man, is this kind of a weird note to open on. Chapter 1, Madonna's Big Dick.
Let me tell you what Like a Virgin's about. It's all about a girl who digs a guy with a big dick. The entire song is a metaphor for big dicks.
Let's face it, in the modern day, Tarantino is a bit famous for his legendary opening scenes. The first 20 minutes of Inglourious Basterds is hailed as some of the greatest cinema that have ever graced the film world. But unlike that movie, Reservoir Dogs does not use its opening to set the scene. It's exclusively an introduction to our main cast of characters and the off-kilter rainbow that they form. The reason for these nicknames the characters have is that Joe Cabot and his son, Nice Guy Eddie, the organizers of the heist, the masterminds if you will, want total anonymity between their 6 employees. Each and every member of the crew goes by a code name: Mr. White, Mr. Pink, Mr. Orange, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, and Mr. Brown. This nickname is the only thing they're allowed to share with each other. The film opens with an attempt to give us a taste for these 8 men's personalities by having a dialogue-heavy scene of them arguing over some breakfast. But I'm gonna be totally honest, I think this opening scene is a little stinky from having its nose up its own ass. But to explain why, let's examine the crew here. I watched this opening scene 8 times and paid close attention to each and every character individually. So let's spend an unreasonable amount of time overanalyzing this one opening scene, shall we? Starting with Mr. Pink, who causes the inciting incident of this introduction. Joe interrupts the crew discussing Madonna's discography to say that it's time for them to bounce. He was going to pay the tab, and it was up to the crew to each throw in a buck to tip the waitress. But when Joe gets back, only $6 lay on the table of the 7 men. This is because Mr. Pink doesn't tip. He doesn't believe in it. He dislikes the system of tipping, doesn't find it to be a valuable part of the government system. He apparently feels bad for the waitresses, but also thinks they can f*** right off to a different job if they want better pay so bad. Doesn't have the common courtesy to add a single dollar to the pile to help pay the woman. The other men say she was wonderful and deserves the money.
Do you know what these chicks make? They make shit. Hey, this girl was nice.
She was okay. She wasn't anything special.
What's special? Take you in the back and suck your dick?
I'd go over 12% for that.
Look,
But Mr. Pink is unsatisfied. He wanted his coffee filled at least 6 times and she only topped him off 3. He's worked minimum wage, but in his words, not at a job society deemed tip-worthy. He's just bent and selfish. It's not that he thinks the world revolves around him, he just only worries about his well-being and his alone. And also thinks via a bit of a victim complex, i.e. if I didn't get tips, why should you? He's disillusioned with the whole world but thinks he's somehow above it all. But when the big bad boss comes over and tells Pink to cough up his buck, he immediately folds. He barks all day but doesn't bite. A little miserable and pathetic. This is kind of a mean thing to say, but for those narcissistic sleazeballs who think they're above it all, Steve Buscemi is probably the perfect casting. People usually attribute that solely to his face, but I think it's his condescending voice. I mean, there's a reason they called this guy to voice Randall in Monsters, Inc. Steve Buscemi was born to play the antagonist. In that context, Pink's attitude makes sense. He's a criminal, but not playing nice in a group might not be the best thing for a job when you need to trust your crew members with your life. That's what's so unique about Reservoir Dogs, that it follows the antagonists. This movie is like an Italian mob flick, but instead of being about a family like most are, it's about a group of strangers who don't even know each other's names. It's because of that subversion of the status quo that this movie can introduce its smoking gun, the rat. But for now, just know that these men aren't heroes. They may be our protagonists, but this is a rogues gallery. But some are more villainous than others. Case in point, Mr. White, played by Harvey Keitel. Mr. White is kind of the closest thing we have to a main character of the film, and despite being a criminal of the same caliber, looks like an upstanding citizen compared to Pink. Mr. White is a very multi-layered character. He's simultaneously the stern older brother or even dad of the crew you don't want to mess with, but also in a way the layman that we're supposed to sympathize with. He's the type of man to stick up to and even poke fun at his boss, who could very well kill him in a way no one would find him. He's got balls, and he stands his ground. He's not the type to bow to authority. He literally rips Joe's book right out of his hands and tells him he'll get it back at the end of breakfast. He bitched the boss. You don't do that. It's what makes us like him, how it's immediately shown that he stands up for what he believes in. When he hears that Mr. Pink doesn't tip, he gets personally offended. He says, quote, "Waitressing is the #1 occupation for female non-college graduates in this country." Because of a racial slur or two that he drops in the first 5 minutes of the movie, we can tell that he is, let's say, old-fashioned. Has morals, but is stuck in his ways. Too traditional for his own good. Because of that prejudice, I don't think that White is out here reading feminist literature or anything like that, so the fact that he knows this statistic about waitressing in the first place kind of tells me that he may have a daughter who could be a waitress. Like I said, he is kind of the paternal figure of the crew, as we'll see very shortly after this. It makes a lot of sense for Mr. White to be a father in his life away from crime, but this movie isn't interested in that, so we never really know. But it is a very interesting facet of his character. I would have to say that Mr. White is the most developed character in this opening scene. There's just so much to dig into. How wise he seems, yet how ignorant he can be, how he always stands on business but is always down to clown. He is a character I would like to see develop. He somewhat proves himself to be not only a loyal and respected member of the crew, but the closest thing the crew may have to a real man. Pink isn't, that's for sure. He couldn't stand up behind an opinion he was just ranting and raving about as soon as the big boss told him to shut up and pay up. Meanwhile, White is making fun of Joe to his face. He's brazen, unlike Mr. Orange next to him, who is a little meek. We can tell he's kind of putting up a front, like he wants to be seen as a little cooler and more nonchalant than he really is. Clearly this is his first big job and he wants to fit in with the rest of his older, much more seasoned cohorts. Much like the previous two fellas, Mr. Orange was cast perfectly with Tim Roth. He jokingly says that Mr. Pink's reasoning for not tipping has convinced him, and he wants his dollar back. He's the embodiment of the new guy, kind of a yes man. Sitting opposite Mr. White would be the opposite of Mr. Orange, new gen meet old head. Joe is the mob boss. He's funny, he's understanding yet threatening. More than anything else, he is the boss. It couldn't be clearer that it's his way or the highway if he said it, and he does. His son, Nice Guy Eddie, is, like his name implies, kind of the emotional half of the business. The father and son are a bit like the left and right brain of the operation. Mr. Blonde is a friend of the business who just got out of prison. He did a job in the past with Joe and Eddie, and he was either the fall guy or just the only one that got caught. Despite this, he held his tongue, never mentioned a word of them, and served 4 years in silence. Back out in the world and straight back into the game. Like Mr. White, he's a multi-layered fella, but in a more mysterious way. He's got the vibe of a wayward cowboy, a roamer you've met at a bar and can never quite tell what they're thinking. He's a rogue in the truest of senses. He's also a big fan of the arts, particularly music, as he's got a variety of opinions on Madonna and everything else on the radio right now. The decision to make the opening focus on the topic of music is a fun one, and will mark the birth of one of Tarantino's many signature traits, being his film's relationship to their soundtracks. More on that later. The last two men are Blue and Brown. Blue is by far the least developed of the 6 men. We learn very little about him, not just in this opening scene, but at any point in the film. Despite his old age, he has some strangely nuanced opinions on Madonna's discography. I personally think he should have said like, "What the hell are you kids talking about?" not given his take on if the 4th album was better than her 3rd. He was the first to stand up for the waitresses against Mr. Pink. He had the potential to be an interesting aspect of the film, but it didn't really matter in the end. I believe the one scene that he would have had was cut from the movie, and in the final release, he's such a minor character that if he was entirely scrapped, nothing would really change. That alone is such a major thing that shows just how amateur of a process this movie was. Before this movie, Tarantino was just a 20-something who worked at a video store and used what was left of his paychecks to film short movies with his friends. This film was able to get off the ground due to, yes, Tarantino's dedication, but also some key connections, a bit of luck, and a massive boost by Harvey Keitel, who saw so much promise in the script that he signed on as the film's co-producer. Having such a big guy in the industry sign his name on your product basically told investors, hey, this indie movie could be something special. And it was that decision that led to this film getting a $1.5 million budget, which, if you know nothing about movies, is next to nothing in the grand scheme of things. We'll talk more about this movie's shoestring budget later, but what I'm trying to get at is to explain that it's difficult yet important to compare Tarantino here to what he would later become. This is a young, inexperienced, slightly unprofessional amateur's movie. And nowadays, Tarantino wouldn't even start a movie's production until he had ironed out every possible kink in the script. After decades of honing his craft, a character like Mr. Blue would simply not exist. He would either be a vital part of the story or left on the cutting room floor, cut so early the character wouldn't even be cast. But the thing that really shows this movie's immaturity isn't the handling of Mr. Blue. It's entirely one Mr. Brown, played by the man himself. Mr. Brown is the one and only exception to this movie's stellar casting. Tarantino's performance is a stain on what would otherwise be a phenomenal group of actors. Now, I understand the urge as a creator to put yourself into your works. Tarantino has done this other times in other ways, usually making himself some kind of racist, slave trafficker, or actual Nazi, like a f***ed up version of Stan Lee. And somehow, by far, this one is his most egregious. This character is jarring, and opening the movie with him was, in my opinion, a terrible mistake. Maybe if it was a different actor, my opinion wouldn't be the same, but even his delivery of these lines just throws the whole opening scene off kilter. This is likely a product of watching the movie 3 decades after it was released, but this dialogue is just not as funny or biting as Tarantino thought it was, and the characterization surrounding this whole opening scene just feels a little strange in retrospect. Believe me, the dialogue is a strong suit of the film, don't get me wrong, but it just isn't as honed as its ancestors wound up being. For instance, we open on Mr. Brown yapping his head off about analyzing the lyrics to the Madonna song Like a Virgin. He comes to the conclusion that the theme of the song is that she's a slut. This sparks some banter back and forth between the characters, but I genuinely struggle to stay invested because Tarantino just sticks out like a sore thumb. He's an abysmal character actor, and in my opinion, just needs to keep his fat head behind the camera and not in front of it. He was originally supposed to play Mr. Pink, a much more vital role to the story, probably because he's the one that gets to say the N-word the most times in the script, but thank God Steve Buscemi, a real actor, agreed to take up that role instead, which legitimately saved this film. The best thing about Mr. Brown is that 15 minutes into the movie, he's already dead. Much like Mr. Blue, I don't think Mr. Brown was really in any way necessary to the plot. This is one of my biggest complaints for Reservoir Dogs, not Mr. Brown specifically, but just the idea of wasted potential. No other Tarantino movie would have an entire character that adds nothing of value to the plot in the same way that Blue and Brown do. There is a world in which these characters do land though. In Brown's case, I genuinely believe that a simple casting change could have drastically improved the characterization. Not just because of Tarantino's dogshit performance, but because Mr. Brown is a white man? Now before you call me whatever you're about to call me for making the argument that Mr. Brown should have been played by a black actor, let me explain something. First of all, Tarantino is pretending to be black in this role. Mr. Brown is throwing around phrases like forever and this cat. You would have to get me severely intoxicated or maybe even lobotomized for me to believe even for a second that this man was the right choice to play a smooth-talking gangster. It reminds me of the photo shoot from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Tarantino is posing like he's the hot one of the group. It's just not right. Another reason why I think this role and this movie as a whole could have benefited from Mr. Brown being a black actor would be because this would have given the movie someone to push back against some of the more racist members of the crew, and add a totally new facet to these characters. Can you imagine how much more racist Pulp Fiction would feel if the dead N-word storage scene didn't have Samuel L. Jackson there to play off of it? That's kind of what parts of Reservoir Dogs feel like. And before you try to call me woke or DEI or whatever the hell you want to say, Tarantino himself has genuinely expressed rebooting this movie with an entire cast of black actors. A weird quirk about QT is that he is completely dead set on making 10 movies in his career and 10 movies only. And so the idea of using one of those 10 to make a reboot was a little off-putting, so he canned the idea, but he does have aspirations of adapting the film into an all-black acted stage play. And back in 2012, they actually did multiple readings of this film's script with an all-black cast, including Lawrence Fishburne, Terrence Howard, Anthony Mackie, Cuba Gooding Jr., Chi McBride, Anthony Anderson, and Common. Yes, the rapper Common played Mr. Brown. I would absolutely love to have seen that version of the film. When talking about the Reservoir Dogs reboot, Quentin even went on to say, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing when I did Reservoir Dogs, which to me, after seeing all 9 of his projects many times, is very clear. And all this to say that Tarantino, unfortunately, is a horrible actor with zero charisma, and his performance is a detriment to the opening of this film. If the movie opened instead with, what do you mean you don't tip, instead of, so you want to know what Like a Virgin's about? The world would likely be a better place. Now don't get me wrong, the Madonna conversation is kind of iconic, and this movie does have a minor theme of music, but that idea was done so much better in many of his following works, which is a shame because this movie has the most music DNA in it. K-Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s radio station is a through line connecting most of this movie, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's nothing more than a motif. We have this opening scene and the famous torture scene, which also has the radio playing, and that's kind of it. Sure, it feels a little thematic to talk about music, but it almost has more of a meta importance than a narrative importance. Music is important to Tarantino's movies, and so this opening scene feels like it works. But in the vacuum of this one film, I don't really find it to be all that necessary, interesting, funny, or insightful. Quentin absolutely loves subtly commenting on his movies in his movies. So to me, this opening scene is almost like a commentary about the film itself. Much like Madonna's Like a Virgin, his filmography can seem gratuitous on the surface, but there is a genuine artistic merit to be found in both. I like this kind of contextualization, but I think this sort of thing would be better fit somewhere in the movie that isn't the very opening scene. I know it would be more typical, but I think the movie should have opened with the scene of Joe giving the men their aliases, then periodically bouncing itself back and forth to meeting the men and seeing the fallout of their job gone wrong. And then if you need to include this scene, have it as like a fun little epilogue. Opening the first scene of your first movie with a meta commentary on your film style is just a little uppity to me. And I could very well forgive that overconfidence if the scene did what I think it needed to do, which is establish our 8 characters. But the only 3 characters we leave this scene understanding even a little are Joe, White, and Pink. Everyone else remains kind of a mystery, some for the better because they hardly matter to the story at all. The reason I'm being so harsh is because this simply does not stack up to Tarantino's modern day perfectionism. If this scene in this movie was done 30, 20, or even 10 years after it did, with the experience Tarantino has, I guarantee that we would have left this scene genuinely caring about every person at this table. The fact that we don't is a major drawback. This scene is fun and entertaining, but the allure of this movie isn't the witty banter or these 8 strangers as a collective. The draw of the film is the simple idea that the job went sour because one of these men was a rat. That is what the film is about. That is the source of the drama and the suspense we came here for. The fun of this movie is trying to decipher which of these men is the narc. One of these men isn't who they say they are, and it leads to every second of the film being worth looking at under a microscope. If each of these men felt like narrative equals, crossing them off the list one by one would feel very satisfying and fun. But because only 2 members of the crew really get any major characterization, the guessing game is a lot less fun and feels stale right off rip. Listen, I could keep going, but if I spend another minute talking about the first 5% of this film, I may wind up regretting it, as the rest of this movie is just as worthy of discussion. Over the next 2 hours, we will see these men all crack and break, each in their own way. Their facades will fall, and it will be revealed what lies underneath. But instead of painstakingly discussing every plot beat the movie follows, I think I should instead go back through the rainbow and discuss how each character was handled along the runtime of the story. Chapter 2, Over the Rainbow. Starting with Mr. Brown, he's pointless and dies. Wonderful! I hate him because Tarantino's performance is deplorable. Next is Mr. Blue. He's even more pointless somehow and dies off screen. Stellar! I hate him because there's nothing about him to like. Then Mr. Blonde, finally an actual character, real name Vic Vega. He's a little hard to dig into because that would be psychoanalyzing a psycho, but while he is a more memorable part of the film, I struggle to say he's all that well written. I mean, what do we leave the film knowing about Mr. Blonde? He likes music, relishes in the suffering of other people, is oddly trustworthy in the right circumstances, and that's about it. His death is a cool moment, but not for him. His character has hints of depth, but feels pretty decisively one note. Also, is it just me, or did Michael Madsen draw the shortest straw every single time when it comes to characters in Tarantino's movies? He never got to be somebody really cool. Mr. Blonde is his biggest standout role by far, and that just kinda bums me out, because he's a great actor. Originally, he was supposed to play Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction, but one thing led to another and that role fell to the hands of John Travolta. Tarantino decided that Vic Vega and Vincent Vega were brothers, and even intended to do a movie at one point with the both of them called Double V Vega. This never came to fruition, and honestly, I'm glad. We'll talk more about Vincent in the next episode of this series, but Toothpick Vic, in my opinion, is just not an interesting enough character to be molded into a leading man. I hate him because he's an underdeveloped, frankly trite character, and honestly a wasted casting of a wonderful actor. Taking a break in the middle of the rainbow, I'd like to discuss Joe Cabot. This may be an off-color thing to say, but I honestly just don't think Tarantino in his ignorant young age was smart enough to write a compelling mastermind. Like, we're supposed to believe that Joe is a smart, cautious man, a man so careful that he won't even let his goons tell each other their names. Despite that, I'm supposed to believe this guy would do a job this big with dudes he can't even trust with his whole chest? How in the world am I supposed to see Joe as this cold, calculating man When hours before one of the biggest heists of his career, he goes out in public with his own son and 6 highly overdressed men completely nonchalantly. It doesn't even matter if they all die in the end because their faces are plastered on every camera in a mile radius of this coffee shop. Joe and Eddie have this huge office and a grand plan, but couldn't afford a goddamn coffee machine and a desk to sit around in privacy. I hate Joe because he feels stupid to me. And so his big mistake in the end feels a lot more obvious than his big self-betrayal that it's supposed to be. When it comes to Eddie, I've got next to nothing to really say. Chris Penn does a nice job, but I don't find Eddie to be particularly likable, extraordinarily memorable. He's not smart or stupid, he just kind of exists as one of the cogs in the machine of this film. I hate him because any likability he had is dashed by his very casual racism. This was the 1990s, not the 1890s. Do better. I'm not kidding, no exaggeration, this movie has a higher ratio of racists to normal people than Django Unchained. But with them out of the way, we can finally get to the 3 main players of the day. And I think I'd like to start with by far and away the most contentious of them all, Mr. Pink. Pink, to me, is an exceptionally interesting character, a monstrously cheap, shockingly smart, nervous wreck of a confrontational skeptic. I love asshole characters, and he is a heel. He is the kickstart to many of the most important scenes in this movie. The whole tipping diatribe in the intro is because of him. He is the first one to really understand the gravity of the situation. He's the one that notices that there was without a doubt a rat in the house. That the job didn't just go bad, it was made bad. He's the one that actually made it out with the diamonds. He is the one that had the foresight to hide those diamonds, sparking the entire back half of the plot. He is an amazingly important and interesting character in the film that would without a doubt be my favorite character in the entire picture if he wasn't hands down the most racist character in Tarantino's filmography bar actual slave owners. Tarantino wrote this part for himself, which is an extremely odd aspect of this character, and while I am extremely glad it went to Buscemi, I'm extremely sad with how the character is handled. Just a few stray slurs turns this character I'm rooting for into a character I want dead. Speaking of dead, everyone in this movie dies except Pink, who is, at best, unconfirmed. He runs outside at the end of the film after the last big shootout, has a gunfight with the police, and then "put your hands behind your back" is heard without a single gunshot after this point. So it's more than likely that Pink was arrested and spared by fate. And if he got off with a light sentencing, there's a chance he could get out, go to where he stashed the diamonds, and get away relatively scot-free in comparison to every other member of the crew who lost their lives. Why make the character who gets the closest thing to a W the most racist? Furthermore, why cast that individual as yourself? I hate Pink because he makes me feel bad. Tarantino's writing is good enough and Buscemi's acting is good enough that I leave scenes with Pink seriously caring about his character arc and development. Then he says something that makes me remember that he's a racist, sexist, narcissistic, evil pig, and then I just feel bad. Tarantino is usually good at making you feel good. This is like the opposite of vindication. By the way, I'm not kidding, but Steve Buscemi's performance as Mr. Pink in Reservoir Dogs is genuinely, seriously, actually what inspired Eiichiro Oda's initial design for Blackleg Sanji from One Piece. The most sexist character in this film inspired the most chivalrous character in history. The most racist character in this film inspired one of the most kind-hearted Straw Hat Pirates. The most slimy and nasty character in this film inspired one of the most trustworthy and dependable members of the crew. And the downright ugliest motherfucker in the world inspired one of the most beautiful men to ever walk his planet. Oda would wind up writing his own problematic character named Mr. Pink a few decades later, who I love infinitely more than the original. The fact that the inspiration for the Sanji has its roots in a character that Tarantino wrote to be played by himself genuinely makes me sick to my stomach. And for that and everything else, I hate Mr. Pink. Alright, Jesse, who's up next?
Mr. White? Mr. White. Mr. White. Mr. White. Mr. White. Mr. White.
Discussing Mr. White is honestly extremely difficult to me. But here's my main dilemma. I love Mr. White. He's professional but understanding. He's a sympathetic empath whose feelings can get in the way of a job well done. He can be explosive and heated, but only because of how richly passionate he is about everything happening around him. Harvey Keitel brings this character to life in such a fun way, and from beginning to end, watching his compassion go from being his strong suit to his downfall is mesmerizing. But Tarantino made the odd decision to make him very casually racist. Are you noticing a pattern? In my experience, over the course of the movie, you start to hate more and more of the characters involved. There comes a point where you're like, hey, at least one of these guys is a half-decent human being, until you realize that he isn't. You've got to keep in mind that the negativity in my tone is really just because of how I'm comparing this movie to QT's other works. Reservoir Dogs is still better than a lot of movies out there, believe me. It just has some hang-ups that tell me that this is definitely not in the upper echelon of this man's filmography. Imagine if the girls from Death Proof were racist for no reason. If Vincent Vega, The Bride, Max Cherry, or Shoshana were racist for no reason. I think now is as good a time as any to dive into one of my biggest drawbacks of the film, which is its flagrant use of slurs. Something that has conflicted me ever since the first time I saw it. In Tarantino's other movies, use of slurs have some sort of purpose, be it historical or at least narrative. But in this movie, it really feels like they're just being thrown around to give the movie some kind of edge. You might say, well, it's to show you that these guys are bad people. Yeah, they're bank robbers and murderous gang-affiliated diamond thieves in the mafia who torture cops. I think we got that. This movie isn't about racism and doesn't even feature a person of color in the main cast, so the overuse of slurs really just serves to confuse the audience. Especially since the person spouting the most of them is someone who narratively I feel like we're supposed to at least like a little? The opening scene is about how Mr. Pink is an asshole. He doesn't tip waitresses. This is all the exposition we need to understand he is an asshole. So the constant casual racism is narratively completely pointless and ultimately extremely redundant and reductive. It only serves to make the audience conflicted on how to feel about him by the end of the movie. The same could be said, but even stronger, about Mr. White, the closest thing the movie has to a protagonist. Now, it's not that I think nuance is bad, but like I made very evident at the start of this video, Tarantino would go on to be a very vindicating director, always giving the audience what they want. But in this movie, the most racist asshole is the one that gets away with the least consequences. And the one I'd really love to like, I simply can't because of his attitude. Joe Cabot makes flagrant slander to both black and gay people, but he is supposed to be an old asshole stuck in the glory days of crime. I get it. His son Eddie, who grew up with Joe, makes disparaging comments about Jewish and Mexican people and at least says one hard R. Pink drops like 5, but is supposed to be somewhat of a shit-stirring villain. But Mr. White also says it, along with calling women bitches, gay people butt cowboys, and I'm not even going to repeat what he said about Japanese people. I understand that in a way it makes sense and is kind of realistic for a 40-something-year-old American man in the 1990s to behave this way, but you have to understand that because of that, I can never like him. The reason I'm confused is because this movie clearly wants me to. It's difficult to talk about this because as an audience member, I do like to be challenged, but I don't really like to feel this conflicted. Years after watching the film, Hans Landa and Calvin Candy are wonderfully written, expertly acted, deplorably racist villains that make me feel positively conflicted. I love to hate them. You could easily call them your favorite character in their respective films, and their writing and execution and performance is so well handled that I would not call you a bigot for that. But if you told me Mr. White or Mr. Pink was your favorite character in all of Tarantino's work, I'd be like, the racist old white dude? Seriously? I don't love to hate him, I hate to love him. That's negative confliction. Oh, and forget the Bechdel test now, because there isn't a single pixel of a woman in this entire film. I will be the first one to say that the fact that Tarantino can make you care about the racist dickheads at all, and all the other morally gray to straight up evil freaks here, is genuinely a testament to his character writing at the end of the day. But I seriously challenge someone who defends this aspect of the movie to tell me why it's important. What does the racism in Reservoir Dogs, specifically from the likes of Mr. White, tell us as an audience? What does it mean? What is it for? What does it accomplish? Because to me, it just seems like an edgy freak in his 20s wanted to give his screenplay a little bit more edge. Walter White from Breaking Bad is a pretty bad guy, but he's also, at least in the beginning, a pretty good guy. Now imagine if he was racist the whole time for no reason at all. It would make him a little bit harder to sympathize with, no? That would muddy the waters and add conflict between the character and audience that is just completely unnecessary. Sure, it adds a layer to the character, but why? Many people call Tarantino the king of dialogue. But really, I think character work is where he shines. Even the most background characters in this movie are more fun, charismatic, and well acted than the majority of characters you see in movies today. And yes, dialogue is a huge part of that, but it's also their actions, their decision making. The narrative web of people that Quentin spins together is always the highlight of his works. But in Reservoir Dogs, that stellar character work would have been more effective if they all weren't constantly quipping nasty strays and slurs towards black people, Mexican people, Jewish people, Japanese people, gay people. You get the idea. I can understand wanting to make a character or even all of them bad, but this only works when they not only all lose, but are all the butt of every situation. Think of characters in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. These characters have slurred, done blackface, and honestly somehow much worse. But the justification for that is that they all are ignorant dumbasses and never fail to suffer the consequences of their own horrid actions. For the show to succeed, they must fail. And while nobody really wins in this movie per se, they try to give most of them so much humanization and moments where we're supposed to feel for them as an audience that it just gets really conflicting. In It's Always Sunny, you can't make Dennis Reynolds a badass with hype moments and aura because that would be stupid and undermine his character as a pathetic villain. I don't know, all I'm really trying to say is that maybe don't make all the racists cool and funny. Briefly back to Breaking Bad, Todd is a bigot. But because he is pathetic and doesn't get a hero's journey with a compelling ending, it's narratively okay. Now if Jesse was a bigot, that would negatively impact the entire story. And you can't just justify it by saying, oh, he's a criminal, it's just showing that he's a bad guy, okay? Do you see how stupid that argument really is now? Mr. White feels like the Walter White, the Jesse. Someone who, yes, is in a life of crime, but someone who we can ultimately sympathize with in a way. Make him likable! I really think Tarantino just wanted to be a little gratuitous for gratuity's sake and wound up pushing it way too far and doing too much. It feels like the product of Tarantino being an edgy idiot. And so honestly, when someone tells me Reservoir Dogs is their favorite Tarantino movie, I internalize them as a bit of an edgy teenage idiot. QT wound up writing some of the most powerfully inclusive movies of the last 2 decades, and countless black Americans love characters like Jackie Brown, Jules Winnfield, and Django Freeman. Every single one of his movies after this point became so much more tasteful and nuanced, and we may just have to cut our losses and say that if we can't take Quentin at his Reservoir Dogs, then maybe we don't deserve him at his Django Unchained. At the end of the day, my point is this. I like Mr. White because he stands up for the little guy. He defends Mr. Orange at every turn. He takes blows fighting for the waitress in the opening scene, pinning himself as a kind-hearted intellectual who cares about the well-being of women at large. So later in the film, when he's revealed to be racist, I don't feel that good. I feel tricked. And not in a satisfying way, not in a meaningful, well-written way. It's just like when the uncle you thought was cool says something incredibly out of pocket at Thanksgiving dinner. And for that, I hate Mr. White. Finally, let's discuss the real crux of the film. One, Mr. Orange. For the people who have seen this movie, you might be wondering why I kept the traitor's identity a secret this whole time, and it's because I bet all 100 people who are watching this right now who somehow haven't seen the movie could still probably guess that it was him who was the rat. This isn't some epic twist where the guy in the middle of the saw trap stands up for the first time in the whole movie at the end. No, White rules out Orange being the culprit right at the start of the movie, which tells most keen-eyed viewers, okay, it's probably him. I mean, obviously, he's the youngest one, the clearly least experienced, the yes man doing what everyone around him tells him to. He folds under zero pressure and snitches on Mr. Pink in the opening scene of the movie when Joe asked him who didn't throw in. It's all there. You know what it feels like? Have any of you seen Regular Show? Imagine if in season 6 of Regular Show, it was revealed that one of the members of the park was a spy. Obviously, it would be Thomas. He's the new one, the young one, the least experienced, the yes man doing what everyone says. It's the exact same thing. Regular Show doesn't lead us on, it just eventually twists out of nowhere, which honestly might be more effective. How did J.G. Quintel get this better than Quentin Tarantino? I will say, when this is all revealed, the movie does really open up and develop into something really special. Without the Mr. Orange chapter of the movie, it would be a pretty typical crime thriller. But the introduction of this non-linear breakaway plot is what makes this a Tarantino flick. Nearly the whole movie is a bottle movie, meaning most of it takes place in one small space. But then, the bottle pours out all these little shots. The Mr. White segment, the Mr. Blonde segment, and this part with Orange is where it really feels like the bottle is truly broken. The formula, the setup of the movie, its entire scope is broadened. We see who Orange really is, a man named Freddie Neuendijk, an undercover cop on a long con to catch the legendary Joe Cabot. I like a majority of what's happening here, but honestly, if you critically think about everything that's happening real close under the microscope, you'll soon realize how stupid this plan is, how little it makes sense, and frankly, the quite disturbing lengths Officer Neuendijk went to catch Joe. So the first wrench in his plan is that Joe wouldn't be at the job itself. So he actually needs to do the job in the first place. The cop needs to actually rob the store, then get the diamonds to Joe so the police can catch him there. It would have been much smarter for the police to catch Joe anywhere else before this point, like when they met at the bar earlier, or hell, even at the diner in the breakfast scene. But for no reason other than it would make the movie less cool, they don't do this. They wait to catch him after the job, putting dozens of innocent civilians and officers at risk. Where this all went awry is that nobody was supposed to get hurt. But because the clerk triggered the alarm, Blonde started shooting people. This meant that the cops stationed outside of the store, who knew what Nieuwendyk was doing and were there just in case, had to come in so no more unnecessary casualties started piling up. This all makes sense, okay? But what doesn't make sense is why the police continue to pursue the crew after this point. Their real goal is to catch Joe. These 5 guys are targets too, but not of the same degree. So all the police need to do is lay off a little bit, let the men get away, and think that the job went as good as possible. So they meet up with Joe and can catch the big Italian bastard. But they don't do this. The police chase them relentlessly like dogs. They shoot and kill Mr. Brown and Mr. Blue in broad daylight. They chase Mr. Pink through the streets, causing a gunfight with innocent people in the crossfire. Why are the police doing this? Do they not know about the undercover mission? They have to, because they were stationed here because of it. Not only is all of this endangering way more people, but it's also scaring Joe away from meeting the men because the job is going so bad. That's the reason why Joe doesn't show up for 2 hours. This is the same logic for why police officers in real life don't go on the aggressive during police chases. To police, at least the good ones, minimizing unnecessary casualties is always priority number 1. And even if it wasn't, this is completely going against their mission of apprehending Cabot. Freddy watched his coworkers and friends get gunned down and said nothing at all to catch Joe. He watched his comrade get tortured and nearly lit on fire and said nothing to catch Joe. To him, that is the main priority. He only takes the opening to save the cop once he realizes that it won't jeopardize his mission. But most egregiously, he shot and killed an innocent woman after stealing her car in a fit of emotional rage after she shot him in self-defense. This one move is the reason I hate Mr. Orange. That woman was entirely in the right. Like, from Freddy's position, how could you live with yourself after this? Is catching Joe really worth that innocent lady's life? Is catching Joe really worth the half a dozen people and who knows how many officers were killed at the jewelers? It's not that this isn't an interesting turn for the movie, but it makes him very unlikable. He was the only character in the movie that isn't racist, so he's the only one that I wanted to like. Nobody in this movie is enjoyable, and that is one of, if not its biggest flaw. Every single other Tarantino movie has likable characters, even if they are all rotten bastards like this movie's cast. A movie we'll be discussing much later in this series is Tarantino's 8th film, The Hateful Eight. It follows a bunch of reprehensible people stuck in one room. Characters include assaulters, bigots, criminals, traitors, killers, liars, and more. And also involves a big plot twist regarding a rat in the house. We'll touch more on that movie in its own video someday, but long story short, it basically does everything Reservoir Dogs does, but better. To me, it almost feels like The Hateful Eight is an apology for Reservoir Dogs, because it's longer, slower, more deliberate, better written, the characters are actually likable and understandable despite all being so evil, and they're given enough background to actually sympathize with. And mild spoiler for The Hateful Eight, everyone dies in that one too, but in a way that's satisfying. The ending of that movie is vindicating and brings people together. At the end of Reservoir Dogs, Joe storms in ready to kill Orange. After mulling it over, he was the only person it could have been because he was the only one he wasn't 100% sure on. First of all, once again, this makes Joe feel stupid as shit and completely undermines him. You know who else is stupid and undermined? Orange, and by extension, the entire LAPD. After all this, all the death and sacrifice, all the people that should be behind bars being shot dead where they stand, why do they not just rush in the second Joe enters the building? Why do they even let Joe enter the building? They have eyes on this entire facility and have been waiting all day for Joe to show up here to catch him in the act. The second this big fat Italian bastard stepped out of his car, 35 SWAT guys should have rolled up on him, but no. After waiting all day, the cops just let him stroll right in to have a Western standoff with one of their own officers. White steps in to defend Orange. Joe tells him to move. Eddie butts in, and the three have a standoff and blow each other away. First of all, this has been pointed out a million times in a million reviews, but this ending looks terrible. Let me break it down. Joe is aiming at Orange, okay? White is aiming at Joe, okay? And Eddie is aiming at White. Notably, no one is aiming at Eddie, but in a split second, Joe shoots Orange, White shoots Joe, Eddie shoots White, and Eddie just gets shot by no one and still explodes in blood and falls to his death. The reasoning I've heard for this is that Chris Penn, aka Nice Guy Eddie's blood pack under his shirt was misfired, going off a little earlier than it was supposed to, making it look like they all truly shot each other at the exact same time. What was apparently supposed to happen was that White shoots Joe, then turns and shoots Eddie. Because of the tight budget and some time constrictions, they couldn't refilm this. But this is just yet another thing to confuse the audience unnecessarily. Another amateur mistake that he would never make today. When I first watched this, I thought I must have missed something. Pink must have shot Eddie, but no, he's hiding under the stairs. Orange must have shot Eddie. No, he emptied his clip on Blonde earlier. It really is just supposed to be White shooting them both, but pardon my lack of suspension of disbelief, I just don't buy it. Mr. White is not the man with no name. I can see that he doesn't hit them both. This looks like shit, it makes no sense, it's confusing and unbelievable. Then Pink comes out from under the stairs where he was hiding this whole time and then slinks away before getting either arrested or shot outside. After this terrible mess of a climax, the only ones still clinging to life are Larry and Freddy, Mr. White and Mr. Orange. Larry, content with his life, crawls to Orange to comfort him. Larry had sacrificed everything except his morals. He was willing to die on this hill that Orange was a good man. He saw him get shot, spent the whole day risking life and limb for him, defending him from the police, criminals, and his own fears. He felt Orange was almost like a son to him, that he was a good kid and that he couldn't possibly be a snitch. Freddy, now with a second bullet in his gut, begs Larry to hold him. The two men cry and share an embrace, and it's here where Freddy tells Larry the truth. Larry, I'm so sorry. I'm a cop. I'm sorry, Larry. Larry, I'm sorry. I will now read you an excerpt from something that I lost the source for. I don't remember if this was a wiki article or a blog post or a Reddit thread or what. I can't find it anymore. I've been scripting this video for like 7 months and I'm a little disorganized. But here goes. Many people have asked Quentin Tarantino why Mr. Orange confessed to being a cop to Mr. White at the end of the movie. They argue that he only had to keep quiet for 60 more seconds and he would have been in the clear. He mentions this in the DVD commentary for the film. His response to these individuals is that they did not truly understand the movie if they're asking this question. Tarantino says that in all of the Asian countries in which this movie was released, this question was never once asked. He said that in Japan, they have a word for this called jinji. Without an English equivalent, it basically means that this was something that Mr. Orange had to do as a man, something that he owed to Mr. White. Furthermore, he could only do it in those 60 seconds when Mr. White would have had the opportunity to do whatever he deemed necessary. This final aspect of the film is wonderful. It almost makes me forget about the horribly executed shootout sequence 30 seconds earlier. You see, to me, this is good confliction. The police barge in, guns start blazing, and the next thing you know, everybody's dead. White kills Orange in a fit of rage after being betrayed and his trust being trashed, and in retaliation, the police blast him away. This ending to me is good confliction. I like being conflicted in the way that my mind is racing once it's over. Why did he tell him? Why did he shoot him? Who shot who? The sheer tragedy of the situation in its entirety. These are feelings I want to be having at the end of a movie, and White's revenge on Orange punctuates the beginning of Tarantino's career. For every movie after this, the grand moment of pure vindication isn't just relegated to the last 10 seconds of the movie, vindication becomes the movie. Without this hot mess of a film, we never would have gotten Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill, Death Proof, Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and whatever comes next. But before I call it a day and start anticipating those videos, I think it's about time we pick up all the pieces and get my final thoughts in order. Chapter 3. Reservoir Dogs. I've been complaining much more than I thought I would be in this video, but what are some of the pros of Reservoir Dogs? I mean, it definitely has some. I'm gonna number my compliments, and this will be important later. Starting with a bit of a backhanded compliment, this serves as a good appetizer for Tarantino's work in a way. It lays the groundwork for a lot of things that would be staples moving forward, such as 1. The snappy, quick-witted dialogue. The way characters talk to each other in this movie is what I would describe as entrancing. 2. This is the start of his OST mania. The tracks he chooses for his films are incredibly important, and with a movie focused slightly on music such as this one, it feels very effective. 3. The characters, as much as I find them hateable, are still relatively well written. I may not like or sympathize with any of them, but I can appreciate who they are and what they accomplish as characters. 4. This really kicks off his obsession with the bloodbath ending. Many of his movies, more often than not, actually end in a massacre, and this is one of the prime examples of that. 5. This is where Tarantino's love for nonlinear storytelling has its roots, a tool he would come to use time and time again. 6. The aesthetic of this movie is very well executed. From the cameras they use to the shot composition and staging, it conveys what it needs to in a simple and effective way. And 7. This movie is great at ramping up, it just keeps getting better and better as it goes on, and that is one of the major keys to making a long movie feel short. Those were 7 of my praises for the movie, but of those pros, how many are diminished by the mere existence of his other films? Spoiler? It's all 7. 1. If you like good dialogue, Pulp Fiction is a better pick. 2. Coming from someone who owns every one of these soundtracks on CD, if you like the wonderful OST of his films, I would say literally all of them, bar maybe The Hateful Eight, have beat this movie by a mile. And that's just in being iconic. Hateful Eight's soundtrack is without a doubt better than this one. There's like 2 or 3 iconic songs from this movie, whereas if you asked me to name 10 songs from Django, Kill Bill, or Pulp Fiction, I could, easily. 3. If you like well-written characters, once again, literally every movie Tarantino has ever made drags this through the mud. These characters feel like cardboard cutouts compared to some of the legends that would later come. Even Mr. White or Mr. Orange don't even hold a candle to Cliff Booth, King Schultz, Shoshana, or Jackie Brown. 4. I won't say any spoilers, but if you like a gruesome ending, even ones where literally every character dies, Tarantino has done much better. 5. If nonlinear storytelling is your jam, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Death Proof, and The Hateful Eight clear this movie in interestingly wild pacing. I mean, oh my god, this movie has flashbacks inside flashbacks inside flashbacks. 6. While the aesthetic is honed well, it cannot compete with the kung fu aesthetic of Kill Bill, the western drama of Django Unchained, or the slasher horror of Death Proof. This movie is bland by comparison. And 7. Yes, this movie is good at ramping up its stakes, but other movies of his actually play with that idea and do things much more interesting. The big bombastic bloodbath in Kill Bill takes place halfway through its story. The main character death that we fear so much happens way earlier in Pulp Fiction. The entire status quo changes halfway through Death Proof. I could go on. Yes, this movie does a good job at ramping up. It makes 1 hour and 39 minutes feel like 1 hour and 20 minutes. But Django and Bastards are 3 goddamn hours and hardly feel like 2. I'm sorry, but this movie is in no way better than any of his other films. You know what? I take back what I said. This is a good precursor for Tarantino's work, but it's anything but an appetizer. You should not watch this one first. I saw this one after many of his greatest hits, and I could appreciate it a lot more with the context of what his career in film style would evolve into. But watch this first, and it may put you off from even watching the rest of them. To answer the question of the day, is Reservoir Dogs Tarantino's best movie? Quite honestly, I'm confident in saying it's his absolute worst. But our discussion doesn't end here. Because with my general compliments comes some general complaints, and yes, I have more. This movie feels amateurish. Simply by virtue of being the first of his tenure into the production of feature films, this movie winds up being generally a little ugly. It's also mixed horribly. Between distant echoed mumbling dialogue in the warehouse and Orange bleeding out half the movie, it's honestly hard to catch everything without subtitles. And I'm one of those people who need subtitles no matter what, so it's extra infuriating. There's also no villain in this movie, which for Tarantino is pretty odd. It's because of that this movie doesn't use Tarantino's thesis as well as all the others, that being revenge. It still has moments of it, like Orange killing Blonde, the final shootout, and White shooting Orange, but he explores this theme much more deeply in subsequent films. It's because of this to me that this film feels so much less vindicating than all his others. He doesn't give the people what they want here necessarily, at least not in the same degree as the revenge thrillers he would eventually go on to write. The script is profane and gratuitous for the sake of it, for the sake of getting away with it, for the sake of shock value. Boys under the age of 14 and men over the age of 50 will probably love it for that. But let's keep this out of middle school and out of the nursing home, shall we? This is the 20th century. The least you could do is write a movie either without 20 slurs in it or cast a single person of color. In the very last second of this review, I just remembered that there is one black person in this movie, Orange's coworker, boss, friend. He's such a minor role, but in retrospect, why not give this guy the role of Mr. Brown and give Tarantino the random Fed job? Whatever, I'm kind of over it at this point, but this movie is just needlessly hateful. I seriously wonder if that's why he made The Hateful Eight. Like, I could do this better. Of all my myriad complaints though, one reigns supreme. There's one thing I find inexcusable about this movie, and that's its rewatchability. Sure, this is partly because it's a movie with a twist, but I would definitively say that this is the least rewatchable Quentin Tarantino film. I often rewatch Death Proof for fun. The first month I saw Django Unchained, I rewatched it over a dozen times. Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Basterds, these are movies that get better every single time you watch them. You notice new things to appreciate each and every single time. This movie, on the other hand, has diminishing returns. It gets worse after every repeat viewing. And that is the sign of a bad movie, or at the very least just an okay one. Now, I can be a little harsh with my movie rankings, but my final review for Reservoir Dogs is 3.5 stars. Reservoir Dogs isn't a bad film, but it is a misguided, edge-fueled amateur endeavor with a lot to be desired and not enough to love. It especially feels piss poor in correlation to the other 8 films of its family, because I find myself thinking of each and every one of them so often, while this one just kind of exists. It's not god-awful, and it's not exceptional. It's mid! For that, be glad I even gave it a 3 and not a 2.5. But before we go, I'd like to do one last thing. Jallo's epic table of badass lines and character kickassery, aka my jet black scale. This isn't a scoring system, it isn't a review table, it's not scientific, it's just some fun statistics I'd like to carry through this entire series of Tarantino reviews. 10 questions, 10 answers, 10 movies. 1. What is the most iconic scene of Reservoir Dogs? Answer: the torture scene. This one moment is somewhat of a microcosm for all of QT's work. It's graphic, it's shot well, it's entrancing, it's a little bizarre. It utilizes the soundtrack like no other and ends with an explosive twist. What's not to love, really? Easily the best scene in the movie. 2. What is the best sequence of Reservoir Dogs? Answer: the commode story. When it's revealed that Orange is a traitor, the way Tarantino goes about this is via a story about using the bathroom. If Freddy wants to really dissolve into his role as Mr. Orange, he needs to have every single detail of his fake life thought out in advance. So we see him learn a diatribe about going to the bathroom with weed in his pocket and coming across a group of cops with a police dog. It's just a funny little story, but the show uses this to show us the learning curve and process of Freddy's job. He starts off forgetting every other line, calling the exercise dumb, and then we see him start to get the hang of it, to even act it out with his fellow policemen just so that he can get it 100% down. By the time Freddy tells the story to Joe, it feels like second nature. He's completely assimilated from cop to robber. Watching this whole procedure from start to end, getting to see him actually go from Officer Newendike to Mr. Orange, is an incredibly effective way to encapsulate his mission, and it's my favorite sequence in the film by quite a bit. I think this part of the movie is where it really opens up and becomes something truly one of a kind, and I almost wish that instead of a spoiler, his mission was just kind of the plot of the film. 3. What's the best line of Reservoir Dogs? Answer: well, some runner-ups include, "You shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize." You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses. And, "If you shoot this man, you die next." Repeat, "If you shoot this man, you die next." But my vote for the best line in the movie is, "Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite?" A quote so good we had to hear it twice. 4. What is the most vindicating moment in Reservoir Dogs? Answer: this one's close, but I think it's gotta be the very end. I was originally gonna say Freddy shooting Mr. Blonde, easy, but we don't really care about the cop all that much. In fact, the movie kind of goes out of its way to dehumanize police officers by not even referring to them as real people. Granted, we do start to sympathize with Officer Nash when he starts crying about his family and such, but we don't really feel all too vindicated for him when Orange blows Blonde away. We're more captivated with the twist. Plus, we only really start to like him when he reveals he was about to die to keep Freddy's secret. Plus, Nash gets one-tapped by Eddie later, so any vindication we would have is a little wasted anyway. Instead, I'd have to say it's the final scene. We feel vindicated as White pulls that trigger. Even though White is the bad guy and Orange is the good guy, it's kind of the opposite from a narrative perspective. White is more the protagonist. This is a movie that follows the villains after all. So we as an audience feel kind of personally betrayed by Freddy's ruse. White ending it for the both of them, when they could have both lived, is the ultimate act of vindication. Much more so for him than us, but still. He would have rather died cathartic than lived without taking that shot. 5. What is the best kill in Reservoir Dogs? Answer: so I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit and give 2 answers. I'm going to give my brain's answer and my heart's answer. So my brain is like, it's obviously Blonde's death. I mean, no competition. It's the point of no return for the movie, the start of the end, the final twist that pops the cork on this bottle movie, exploding it into what it would later become. But my heart is leading me astray and telling me that I might want to say the innocent woman's needless death at the hands of Mr. Orange. This moment to me is special in a different way. I know I ragged on it earlier, but I do love this moment. It's where Freddy slips too deep into his role as Mr. Orange. This sort of narratively dooms him to me. It's a different point of no return. Perhaps this is the reason why he told Larry who he was at the end. I'd still say Blonde though, because let's face it, it's probably the correct answer. 6. What is the best song in Reservoir Dogs? Answer, obviously it's Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Wheel. Don't even really feel the need to extrapolate that. 7. Who gave the best performance in Reservoir Dogs? Answer, now this is a more nuanced question, but it's honestly just as easy as the last for me. The answer is Tim Roth's performance as Mr. Orange. Everybody else gets to have some fun and chill out, yell a couple lines, and call it a day. Tim Roth, on the other hand, had to convince us that he was bleeding to death the entirety of the movie, which I can only imagine is incredibly straining. He had to act out playing both sides, had to memorize lines about memorizing lines, whole big speeches. Honestly, one of the best performances of his career. I always felt his character in The Hateful Eight fell a little flat. 8. Who is the best character in Reservoir Dogs? Answer, so to me this is between Orange, White, and Pink, lesbian style. But I gotta go with White. He's simply the most likable, aka least hateable of these men for all the reasons I brought up earlier. He seems like a real man. He has an emotional side that can sometimes get the better of him. I think 90% of people who have seen this movie would agree that this is just kind of the only character you would really want to see or interact with outside of this film. I wouldn't want a Mr. Orange prequel. I wouldn't want to run into Mr. Pink at the grocery store. But Mr. White seems like he's got more to offer than what we saw in the film, which makes us want more of the guy. 9. Who is the best heel in Reservoir Dogs? Answer, Mr. Blonde. I wanted to phrase this question as best villain, but because of this one movie and one movie alone, I couldn't. There is no traditional antagonist in this film, but Mr. Blonde might be the closest we get. That pure, chaotic wild card. He's a heel. Sure, there's Mr. Pink, who I called the heel earlier, which he is, but there's a certain X factor he lacks that Blonde has. Blonde is Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, The Rock, Randy Orton. You want to see him get stomped. And finally, we went over the best heel, but who has the best toes in Reservoir Dogs? So this is kind of a gag question referencing Tarantino's poorly disguised, all but explicitly stated foot fetish that tiptoes its way into each and every one of his cinematic endeavors. Except this one. This is the only one with no women, and so no lady feet for the ranking so far. I can all but guarantee I will regret making this joke 9 foot rankings later, but that's future Jallomoth's problem when he starts the next episode. We need to talk about Pulp Fiction. If you haven't already, go ahead and rip me apart in the comments. Am I the friend that's too woke? Is the woke left trying to cancel Reservoir Dogs? Was I too scrutinous or too generous? I'm sure you'll let me know. Thank you to my patrons, lovely people like Noisy Pitta, Greg, Cabra, Sleepy, and DP. If you'd like to reap the rewards of supporting me, which isn't much right now in all honesty because I'm a little strung thin, the link will be down in the description below, or you can head to jallomoth.com. Thank you for watching, follow me on Letterboxd, and stay curious.